So cells make tissues, tissues make organs, organs make systems, systems make organisms. That whole list of levels of organization of biology is only possible in multicellular organisms, not in unicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms don't go beyond the cellular level, but they're still alive because that's where the property of life emerges. Now, these terms at the very end here, these bullets, prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. These are typically associated, one with unicellular and one with multicellular. Prokaryotic cells are associated with unicellular organisms. Pro, the prefix pro means before, and karyon or karyo means nucleus. So these were cells that evolved before there were nuclei. Eukarya means new or true nucleus. So these are cells that are typically found in multicellular organisms that have a nucleus. So prokaryotic are typically unicellular, and they're typically bacteria. Other living things are made up of eukaryotic cells, and they're multicellular. So you have plants or animals, fungi. Okay. The fourth major theme that our book talks about is evolution and unity of life. So we want to write down some definitions for these terms. Evolution is a very simple definition. I want you to always associate evolution with the term change, because evolution just means that over time things change. And unity of life, when you hear that phrase, it's actually referring to DNA, our genetic information, because every living thing we've ever found on the planet is made up of DNA. So the theme for evolution and unity of life is just reminding us that all living things have DNA, and over time that DNA is going to change. Okay, I want to review really quickly the structure of DNA that you see here in the picture. So this right here on the right hand side is a model of DNA. It kind of looks like a twisted ladder. And we're zoomed in pretty closely here. So if we were to zoom out, we're kind of going backwards here, we would see a longer strand of DNA. And if we were to zoom out again, we'd notice that a strand of DNA has segments in it that kind of control some of our traits. These segments are called genes. And if we were to zoom out even more, lots of genes all together, one big chunk of DNA, all coiled up, it's called a chromosome. So chromosomes, if we start to unwind them, we see these little banded segments along the chromosome that we would call genes. As we zoom in more, we see that the genes are just made up of a long piece of DNA. And as we zoom in, we know that that DNA actually is twisted up like a ladder. So all living things have this DNA, they have these genes, and these genes are using a code to make proteins. And we'll talk about that a lot more third quarter and what proteins actually do for our body. You have to remember with the theme that all this DNA is always changing over time. You can't control it. You can't decide, oh, I'd like to have my DNA change right now, or I'd like to have my DNA stay the same right now. DNA is just going to mutate slowly over time, and that is called evolution. Okay. Now this change is driven by natural selection. Natural selection is simply the idea that organisms that are better suited for an environment will survive there. So let's imagine your DNA that's changing over time mutates, and somehow you have a new DNA mutation that allows you to go outside, stand in the sun, and just do photosynthesis like a plant and get energy. You'd never have to find a food source. You just go outside, soak up the sunshine, and you'd be having lunch. That would give you an advantage. You would probably be able to survive better than other people. And if you could pass that trait onto your kids, they would be able to survive better as well. That's natural selection. If there are mutations or changes in the DNA and organisms are able to better survive, then they reproduce more and they pass that trait on. Okay, let me repeat that again. Natural selection is the idea that if organisms mutate, their DNA changes, and they have a trait that gives them a better advantage to survive, they'll be able to reproduce more and pass that trait on to their offspring. That's called natural selection. Nature selects what's best to survive.